Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my double game week 7 team selection, and it's worth really talking first of all about the Newcastle versus Man City result that happened in the EFL Cup, because Man City actually lost that match. Brentford also lost their match versus Arsenal, which means that we have a very small chance, as confirmed by Ben Crellin, of something crazy happening like double game week 10. Now, the reality I think is that we should expect for the schedule to be City having a blank in game week 18 and then having a double game week in 20. But as I said, because of Brentford and City both losing in the EFL Cup, apparently, as per Ben Crellin, there is a very small sliver of a chance of double game week 10 happening, where you have that sort of Brentford versus Man City game that is the reason for the blank in game week 18 for both teams, to be rescheduled on 10. Now, obviously, our expectations at this point in time, due to the FA Cup results, is with City losing, double game week 20 seems to be the most logical conclusion. So actually, I'm very keen on wildcarding. So if we sort of reflect back to my transfer plans video, thinking now about the landscape, I am actually intending on probably holding onto my wildcard. And that's the way I plan to plan around. Now, that's going to be around that sort of December, late December time, around the holiday vacations. And that might actually be a part of your decision making. For me, it's not really the case. I'll have the time to plan and I'm happy to do so. And I think it would make sense for my team, given that I don't think there are too many pressing transfers outside of, let's say, a little bit of FOMO over those Spurs midfielders, which I talked about recently. As far as, let's say, the impacts of the EFL Cup games, we saw a Chilwell injury. We also heard about an Isaac injury, but I think he actually confirmed himself he's fine. Wilson seems to have a knock and Botman seems to have a knock. Now, whether obviously that has any impact on the weekend games, I don't really know. But based on that, I don't have any huge impacts. However, we also got news earlier this week that Saka, who is someone who's obviously essential to our plans in the next few weeks, might actually be out and he might be dealing with a knock. So for me, what I would say first is Saka is the most important news that I have to sort of pay attention to based on press conferences from Arteta. Now, we know Arteta is a little bit unreliable. I think unless he completely rules out Saka for this game upcoming versus Bournemouth, I'm probably going to assume that Saka's fit, because this has actually happened a couple times before, if we're being honest. Saka confirmed to have a knock, confirmed to not be able to be fit for a game, injured in the warm-up, and then Saka plays, Saka scores, etc. So I do think that if Arteta confirms that Saka's out for the game, then my initial transfer plan is actually going to change, and it's going to be Saka to Son. So even though obviously when you look at the fixtures, right, the best midfielder picks for this week are probably going to be something like a West Ham midfielder or even someone like Foden this week. The reality is both those two teams don't have particularly good games in game weeks 8 and 9. 9, obviously you can argue for City is okay, but game week 8, obviously a tougher game still away from home. So the way I see it, I actually really like Son for game weeks 8, 9, and 10. And so if I'm thinking and planning at least in the short term to medium term, I think Son's the best transfer this week if I know that Saka can't play. Why am I doing that? Because also, conversely, when we're saying that, for example, Foden's going to have a bad game versus Arsenal on paper, I have to say the same thing for Saka as well versus Man City. That's going to be an extremely tough game, and it's a good time to actually move off of Saka for 2 games. Yes, of course, there's Chelsea too, but what we have said about this Chelsea team lately is even though their offense is pretty unimpressive, you're actually still looking at an opportunity here to actually get a Chelsea team that still have a decent defense. So far, they haven't actually been conceding a lot of goals. They haven't also been giving away a lot of chances. Expected goals conceded actually finds them as one of the top 4 or 5 teams. So that's an interesting sort of point of view where I think if you're actually happy to part ways with Saka, knowing he won't play in game week 7, transfer out from Saka actually makes a lot of sense. Now, if you already own Maddison and Son, I think you're probably in a different situation. You might actually want to roll or unfortunately move into, let's say, a West Ham midfielder. But you also know that game weeks 8 and 9 for West Ham are actually rather tough. It's Newcastle and Aston Villa. So I do think that those are my immediate transfer plans. Now, as we also talked about in the transfer plans video, unless we have the Saka news, I think I'm just going to go back to my plan of either rolling or going for a defender transfer. And that defender transfer will be Dalot. I think the comparisons right now in all these positions has to be between Cash, Dalot, and then also a Newcastle defender. Now, Botman, as I said, is confirmed to have a knock. A slight knee issue, I believe, is what I heard. But we don't really know whether Botman will be back for the weekend's fixtures. And actually with Newcastle, you can probably say that that West Ham away fixture is quite bad from a clean sheets point of view for Botman. And also, I don't think we need to completely change our expectations. Yes, Newcastle are getting clean sheets now. Yes, of course, they have the better fixture versus, let's say, a Man United defender in Dalot, or even a Cash, for example, who has a very, very tough game, even though he's at home versus Brighton. You still have to think about the short term, right? So if I think about 3 game weeks once again, I think Dalot has supreme fixtures, right? 3 game weeks in a row where you've got effectively 2 home games, which is perfect for United. And then actually the away game, once again, is versus very, very weak opposition. Another opposition that have really found it hard to actually score consistent goals. A Sheffield United team that have built not too much. Obviously, they scored versus City, but you could see even versus Newcastle just really couldn't summon up or muster up anything in that game. So I'm quite interested in actually the punt of going for Dalot. And that's simply because this is an opportunity to sort of upgrade my defense. It's quite poor, I would say, right now when you have players like Gusto. Obviously, Udogie will come in. I think Saliba, unfortunately, you're just purely looking at clean sheets going on here. I think, for example, Gabriel's a bit more interesting considering his price going forwards. And then even Zinchenko, at least you've got someone who is actually involved in some set piece plays. For example, when Arsenal decide to sort of play around a creative corner kick routine, or at least in terms of open plays, Zinchenko is going to be advanced at times where he might actually have access and forays into open play goal scoring. So those are my immediate thoughts. So I do actually quite like the Dalot transfer, but rolling can make sense too, right? If I, let's say, want to go towards Matty Cash, and he looks very appealing because there's also a Bailey injury. Now, with Zaniolo on the team, he's probably going to actually just play that sort of right winger position. We also know that front 3 of Diaby, Zaniolo, and Watkins is something that we've seen already in terms of the Premier League game. So I don't think that there's a need to sort of get high over Matty Cash playing potentially a right wing role. So I would say in this position, I think rolling could actually make sense if I'm, let's say, not confident about Dalot. And going back to, for example, discussing United, yes, they've actually looked terrible lately, but it is a case of fixtures for me. Last week, I said that a United defender could be a good transfer, and I put him on a cheat sheet, and they still got a clean sheet versus Burnley. And someone would probably retort right now that Amdouni should have scored his chance when he actually hit the post. And you could also say that United probably didn't deserve a clean sheet in game week 1 because they probably should have conceded a penalty. But this is the reality of fixtures as well. So there are ample opportunities for this United team to actually do well. And it's the same logic as, for example, this Newcastle team. They were conceding as well, had actually decent underlying stats, of course, for us to suggest that they were going to be very, very good as soon as the fixtures turn good. And this is my immediate thoughts on a United team that will have Amrabat back, Mount back very, very shortly. And we already saw them, play within the EFL Cup game, and they played relatively well versus Crystal Palace that really didn't muster up anything. So that's a nice little thought for me, considering that Brentford haven't looked particularly good from the attacking point of view lately, considering that Crystal Palace have generally been a poor offense, and Edouard might have an injury, considering that Sheffield United don't look like a particularly good game. It's a nice little 3 game week punt for a Dalot that I think could be interesting. And then at that time in game week 10, I can also do another transfer then, right? I can just go for cash if I'd like to. So those are my thoughts. I also think that when we think about wildcarding as well, we could still wildcard on 10, right? Building towards a game week 10 wildcard, I think my transfers would be exactly the same. I have the same issues in my team. I still need to address getting a defender for game week 7 and 8 respectively, just because of the situation where if you look at my team in game week 8, I clearly still struggle to actually put out 3 consistently good defenders, unless I'm very confident in, let's say, going for the role in game week 7 and then actually playing cash because I think the game is so good in game week 8. But in reality, obviously, Aston Villa's best game is still game week 10, which is a little ways away in game week in that Luton Town fixture. So right now, in terms of my team selection, what I'm going to be playing with is a defending backline right now of Pickford, who finally has his best game and best fixture of the season on paper. This Everton team have actually upgraded lately in terms of their attack. Now, defensive numbers are defensive numbers. The most important thing is whether you get a clean sheet or not. I can't guarantee a clean sheet, but these are the 2 best chances for Pickford to get those clean sheets. So I'm just hoping he delivers finally, and I would really need it. As far as defense as well, I am going to be playing Saliba. It's just a good fixture versus Bournemouth away. We know that this Arsenal team have improved, as I said, as a result of that Declan Rice transfer. And when we look at my team, I will probably be actually going towards Dalot this week, provided that Saka is not injured. So this is the team selection, option A, for example, where Dalot is actually going to join my team. That would mean that I'm actually benching Pervis Estupiñán. And on the other hand, I will also be playing Trippier once again this week, playing versus Burnley at home. He got the rest in the EFL Cup. I will actually mention that Livramento actually got man of the match. So he's clearly a very, very serviceable backup for Trippier. So the people who are concerned about rotation, maybe that is justified. But so far we haven't seen it, and I'm just going to continue playing Trippier like so. As far as the midfield this week, I have Fernandes and Rashford. This is really the 3 game week swing where, since I'm holding my wild card now, at least until 10 at the bare minimum, I really need to see something from this United team, and I'm going to give them these 3 fixtures. It's the best fixtures possible, and if they fail to deliver, then I'm not even going to care about probably Rashford for game week 12 versus Luton. I'll probably just keep Fernandes at that point, just because he's the penalty taker between the two, and move on. But so far, Rashford has been pretty dismaying. Bruno Fernandes, on the other hand, his underlying stats have actually increased, particularly from an expected goals per 90 point of view. So even though this United team look horrific, he's actually one of the few players who actually looks relatively good from an FPL asset owning point of view. As far as the midfield, though, assuming that Saka is fit and ready to play, I will be playing Saka. I will also obviously be playing Sterling this week too. You're looking at a team that actually will struggle probably without Jackson. I don't think Broja actually looks close to being able to start in game week 7. So actually there's a good opportunity maybe that you'll see Sterling in a different position this week, probably going to stay on the right. But Cole Palmer actually had a really good performance as well in the EFL Cup. It might be the case that actually you see Sterling within a central position. I think that that's a little bit of a punt, a little bit of a shout, but that's still interesting versus a Fulham team that are actually bottom 4 in the league in terms of expected goals conceded. Only now so far sort of saved by really poor finishing from opposing teams and also Leno's overall good shot stopping. As far as my 5th midfielder this week, I'm obviously going to be going with Mbeumo. Now, yes, of course, Brentford's data from the attacking point of view, last 2 matches has been, effectively negative, right? They haven't really shown anything in open play that looks good. And Mbeumo also has not been as involved, for example, as he was in the first 5 weeks, where we basically thought that he was 100% essential. And I don't think I've really changed my opinion on Mbeumo too much, right? They do have middling fixtures in terms of one good, one bad, but I would still like to give Mbeumo the opportunity to stay in my team for now, and I don't think he's an immediate pressing transfer. So I will be keeping Mbeumo in the team just because he's also a penalty taker, and it always feels good to have an extra penalty taker in your team. And you can see that in weeks where, for example, Salah last week gets to score a pen. And as far as the forward line this week, Julian Alvarez was actually taken off in the EFL Cup game versus Newcastle at 74 minutes. So I'm hoping, of course, that he gets another start in this situation. Now, if we get, for example, some sort of news that, let's say, Julian Alvarez might not play in the next fixture, and we actually get that news as a leak before the deadline, then, of course, I might be actually just making a very simple move towards Morris, right? And then instead of actually going for that Dalot transfer, I go at Estupiñán. So that's going to be basically option 2, but it's not a very serious option because I think Alvarez will definitely start. So in reality, option 2 is obviously if Saka's injured and I have to bring in Son into the team. That would mean that Estupiñán moves away from my bench and actually moves into a starting position, replacing Dalot. No free transfer used there. And then instead, I go from Saka to Son this week, and that would be my option 2. Just simply based on actual injury news and so on and so forth. But that's going to be my team selection for Game Week 7. If you guys can smash the like button, I would absolutely love that. Let's try and get 400 likes for this video. In terms of your comments, feel free to ask your questions in terms of your wildcard planning, in terms of what your transfers are for this week, what your priorities are for the going weeks. Are you looking at Aston Villa assets? Are you looking at Wilson? Are you looking at Nunez, for example? And that's it for this video. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys shortly on another video.